Hey there, Smoke Master D coming at you with another episode of Barbecue Buyer's Guide, this time focusing exclusively on the Offset Stoker from Heirloom Pits out of Magnolia, Texas. As far as I know, the design is one of a kind. I don't think I've ever seen the idea to combine Texas styles of offset smoker and direct heat pits before. Before we get started, please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, starting with price, it's $5,600. Is that a good price? A bad price? It's exactly what we're going to discuss after we take a closer look at those features. Now, here we go. Starting on the left-hand side, the Offset Stoker opts for a curved elbow exhaust rather than a smoke collector, a choice that helps keep the integrity of the sidewall for the direct heat smoking. Above the elbow, we see a direct heat cooker exit damper, apparently only for use when direct heat cooking. There's a mirror one on the other side and two similar intakes on the lower doors to the main chamber, making this a fully functional hotbox. We see some nice Heirloom Pits badging on the front and 6-inch industrial steel locking casters below that. Now, in the top right, we see the back door to the offset firebox. There's a stainless steel handle and an extendable notch system. And I've never seen anything like that either. Not entirely sure why you wouldn't want to just have your notches like regular, but I suppose they could keep you from a scratching hazard or, better for maybe if you're trying to cover the back of that thing too. We also see in this lower right-hand picture a storage rack and the insulated bottom of the main chamber. So insulation or fire bricks on the bottom of a direct heat cooker are pretty standard, so I think that's why they did that there. And that just keeps the heat into the hot box and keeps those coals lit if they're on the bottom so that they're not going out and you get those drippings down there and they're going to vaporize because of that heat and warmth that comes from the bottom of the hot box. Now, if we look above that, we see that the distance from the railing to the main grate is 7 inches, and it's 13 inches from the bottom to the main grate. And here we see that the chamber is 24 by 50, and that is slightly bigger than the standard 90 gallons 24 by 48. The second level slide out rack comes standard and is 7 inches above the bottom rack. The steel is 1/4 inch construction. Now, the last feature to talk about is the baffle and the throat connector between the firebox and main chamber. There's no picture of that juncture, but I have been told that it is not a scoop baffle and that it does not impede the working of the direct heat cooking. My guess is a slightly downward angled plate, but that's just a guess. If you actually know what it looks like, please put that down in the comments and let us all know. We'll talk a little bit more about the baffle in a bit. And now that we've looked at its main features, we're going to examine whether combining a direct heat pit and offset smoker is a good idea at first glance. And guess what? From a money perspective, it is. If we look at TMG Pits, who make both items, and we look at their Volunteer and the Roll-Off, which are roughly what you're replacing in the Offset Stoker, you see that you get quite a savings. Now, they're not exactly the same. You see that you get a fold-up shelf on the Volunteer, and the Roll-Off has a bit more space on its main rack than the Offset Stoker does. We're going to talk about that main rack and the top rack when we go over how well this will work as a direct heat cooker. So keep that in mind. When you break down the money, though, for these items, together, these two pits cost $8,999.98. Compared to the Offstoker's $5,600, you have a savings of $3,399.98. And now again, say we take a look at Smoke Slinger Pits. The Liberty 94 offset costs $3,495, but has no option for the second level grate like the Offset Stoker has that comes standard. The Smoke Slinger, on the other hand, costs $2,899 and almost has the same amount of grate space as the Offset Stoker's main grate. Since these are less expensive, the savings is only about $794. But it may be worth mentioning here that there will be an extra savings in only having to ship one pit rather than two, which is probably somewhere in the $500 to $700 range, varying depending on how far you are from these builders. So that also needs to be taken into account. So, there's a potential savings here in buying the Offset Stoker. But the one question we still have to ask is whether it will perform as well as its individual counterparts. Now, first, let's look at Offset. As an offset smoker, I don't see any real reason why it shouldn't do as well as other pits like the two compared from TMG and Smokeslinger. Now, will the lack of a smoke collector make some small difference in airflow? Yes. And I said we'd talk about the valve some more, and it's hard to say exactly how successful it will be at evening out the temperatures without knowing more. Really, someone should do a biscuit test to determine the heat distribution. And there's probably a hot spot to navigate while cooking, likely wherever the heat comes up initially through the grate. But that's pretty standard for offset smokers, no matter how much effort their builders put into eradicating those hot spots. I don't think that the extra lower space below the grate should affect things too negatively. In fact, it allows more space for gases to expand, which is good. But since heat rises, a lot of the interaction of the airflow will likely be at the rounded top anyway. Now, one con for this design that I feel I must point out is the lack of drainage while offset smoking. Now, when you do direct heat cooking, the coals will vaporize drippings, but that's not how it works when offset smoking. I definitely think that you'd want to put some sort of lining or something on the bottom to catch the drippings, otherwise they're just going to pool down there. As far as the Offset Stoker working as a direct heat cooker, things become a bit more complicated. The thing about direct heat cookers is that the way they reach lower barbecue temperatures is by keeping the meat a certain distance from the coals. 1904 pits, for example, makes a big deal about having their grates 24 inches from the bottom of their pits. The other two direct heat pits I showed before are 2 feet from the bottom to the main grate, so it's pretty standard. And even just looking at Heirloom Pits Stoker 48, you can tell that it has a whole lot more depth than the Offset Stoker. Now, let's look again at the Offset Stoker. While there's only 13 inches from the bottom to the main grate, there's 20 inches to the second level grate from the bottom. Can you make good direct heat barbecue at 20 inches? Yes you can. In fact, that's the distance from the bottom of my Lone Star Grill's El Patron to its main grate. Now, the top grate is 704 inches squared. The bottom grate is 1,163 inches squared. Those sliding rails seem like they're for high heat grilling on the main grate. You could do plenty of burgers on this pit. Now, how well will this pit do as a direct heat cooker? On the second level rack, pretty well, I think. On the actual main grate, you would have to test the temperatures, but I imagine your direct heat barbecue will likely turn into grilling. Because once you pop over 325, that's where you're at, grilling. You'll know you want to raise it to the second level grate to have that true direct heat barbecue and get it back below that temperature. So now for my thoughts. Do I think the Offset Stoker is a good buy for someone who wants both offset smoking and direct heat barbecue? Yes I do. Now I'm going to qualify that by saying that I do think that there are some trade-offs, and that having separate cookers for each will do a slightly better job at each of them. But I also think that those trade-offs will be acceptable to a lot of people out there who either want to save a little bit of money or who just don't have the space to house 2 gigantic pits. On the other hand, if you already have a direct heat cooker or have an offset smoker, I don't think that I would sell that to buy the Offset Stoker. If I had an offset, I might also try to get a smoke slinger because it has a lot of versatility of its own or one of the other direct heat cookers that I've covered. I'll link that above. And the same in reverse, you know. But if you didn't have either, and say you were upgrading from a Weber Smoky Mountain or something like that, I think this would be an interesting option. And I'd be interested to see reviews from actual users of this pit, but I'm pretty optimistic about this one. So those are my thoughts. If you want to share your own thoughts or any reviews of the Offset Stoker, please put those down in the comments below. And as always, go get your smoke on, y'all.